Plants were first aid long before pharmacies existed, and they still work. Today, we're talking about the 5 most important herbs for natural first aid, how they work, when to use them, and how to actually feel confident using them at home. I'm joined by Jodi Scott, founder of Green Goo, a plant based first aid and herbal wellness company that she built with her mum and sister. Jodi has a background in biology, psychology, and pre-med, and has spent more than a decade translating traditional herbal medicine into evidence-informed remedies for real life. Hi, I'm Emma Sutherland, clinical naturopath, author, mum, and your host. With over 20 years in clinical practice, I've helped thousands of women and families transform their health using evidence-based integrative strategies. Welcome to today's talk. Hey, Jodi, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Hello, hello. Great to be here with you.
So first of all, I'd love to know, how did you become interested in plant-based first aid?
There's so much there. First of all, my mom loved plants. So she taught me a lot about plants growing up. And plants were a big part of our home, whether we were using them to cook, medicinal, gardening. But fast forward, I got my master's in health psychology and specialized in psychoneuroimmunology and was pre-med. And my sister's an herbalist and a midwife. And we were living a really clean, sustainable life, reading ingredients, eating fresh foods. And I was pregnant and I got a cut. I went to my first aid cabinet. I pulled out a topical antiseptic and was like, oh, I'm going to revisit this label. And then I went, ooh, maybe I don't want to put this on. And maybe I don't want to put this on my daughter. And I thought, why are we making this exception? And so that sort of started the journey.
Yeah, I really love that often these transitions happen when we are pregnant or have small children. We start really evaluating and really looking with fresh eyes at what we're putting on our body and what we're putting in our body. So it seems so pertinent to me that that happened during that life stage.
Yes, and it was so interesting too, because I thought here we've just been told that these one-time use chemical solutions were the only solutions to get the job done. And I thought to my sister, are we alone? Are other people like this? And then we found that the natural consumer was willing to abandon their natural ethos because they were told same thing. This is what will get the job done. And then I found it really interesting that chronic skin conditions are at an all-time high. And we'll call it the conventional consumer who's less interested with the ingredients was also dissatisfied, but dissatisfied because of efficacy. Used for 7 to 10 days, and then if symptoms persist, which they often did, then you needed to go see your physician. And I thought this is so interesting that this has not evolved, where we've had so many other evolutions in our wellness journey, and this was still a 100-year-old product of the Industrial Revolution, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. What I like about you and what you do at Green Goo is that you're really known for bridging tradition with science. So when you consider herbal medicine, how do you evaluate the evidence for a particular herb?
Well, it first started with my sister and her herbalist background, and our vision is really bringing forward time-honored traditions. And so we had that information. Now what we needed was the science to back it. And that really only happened, I'd say, in the last 5 to 7 years, where there was funding research that then could support sort of the anecdotal clinical results that we were seeing in terms of people getting the results that they wanted. And what was really interesting for us too, because when we formulate, so one, we're making the ingredients ourselves. Still to this day with our manufacturing facility, the same way we did in our backyard when we were growing the herbs. And we're protecting the integrity of that process because a lot of the plants that people have on the market today in the various products, they're only getting a fraction of the medicinal profile. They have been exposed to high heat, or they're combined with a chemical that compromises that medicinal profile. So when we're looking at the herbs, it's the process. And we know that ancient wisdom has been doing that process for a very long time. But now we have modern technology to really scale that and protect the integrity of the plant. And then we look at not just how the plant is by itself and how it performs, but how it performs with an entourage of other plants and with our physiology. So what we find really interesting when we're formulating is if someone has call it a cold sore or a blister on their toe, your body's actually having a very similar reaction. Maybe the reason you're having a cold sore and a blister are very different. But when you think about taking the technology and the science that we know and how these plants work with our physiology, we can then use the same plants to treat both of those symptoms, which is kind of the inversion of what we've been taught in first aid, which is one, if it doesn't sting, burn, or dry it out, it must not be working. And we're trying to override the symptom. And we think that it's a very different response. And yet our body's doing very similar things, just in various places for various reasons.
And you just touched on it then, but when you think about first aid, most people would think traditional first aid, they're betadine or they're this or they're that they've got their little kit at home. But how do you think herbs fundamentally differ from conventional first aid products?
And that's where herbs are stimulating what the body already knows what to do and how to do it. And it's also eliminating the chemicals that are hard on our system. So a lot of these products that you just shared, they have parabens, petroleums, phthalates, endocrine disruptors that are forcing our body to work harder. And instead, when you bring these plants in their whole form, rich in that botanical profile, they stimulate the body to do what it knows how to do while removing these other ingredients that are making the body work harder and reducing its resilience, which in turn stimulates immune response, nervous system response, and your body gets into override.
It's super interesting, isn't it? I'm so excited today because we're going to talk about one of my favorite herbs, which happens to be calendula. I think this is such a foundational first aid herb. You know, we think about it for skin, but can you tell us how it works? Can you tell our audience why this could be so beneficial to have on hand?
I love that you love calendula too. It is a Green Goo favorite, and it is in most of our formulas. One, it's incredibly
Okay.
sustainable, doesn't need a lot of water, and it's a beautiful flower. It's a beautiful orange flower. It's essentially a weed that we've known in the garden. And what it does, so it is an astringent. It has antifungal, anti-yeast, antimicrobial properties. It also stimulates tissue repair. So it has a beautiful regenerative component to it that's very powerful, combining with like hydration. And what's really great from a wound care standpoint is that when you combine calendula with other herbs like yarrow, plantain, chickweed, comfrey, St. John's wort, all of a sudden you're just elevating that skin repair. And it's so interesting because they just did a study recently, which again, coming back to the fact that we're finally getting some good botanical research out there, is that they found that calendula, when it goes through your epidermal layers, it actually has the ability to stimulate the enzyme that then stimulates regeneration of your telomeres, which is the end caps of your
Wow.
DNA. Yes. And the fact that you can actually take calendula and have it have a systemic response through your epidermis and then have a more holistic impact on your wellness journey. I mean, this is just the beginning of us knowing what these beautiful plants can do.
Yeah, and I also think from my perspective, personally and professionally, there's an energy to these plants that most people don't recognize that there is an energy to these plants and that the energy of the plant has healing properties itself. And I agree with you. It's about time we finally got some really good comprehensive research on these herbs, which is difficult because nobody wants to fund it, right? But the thing is that the energy of the herb also has such a beautiful impact when used in the right way, as well as the actual constituents or what's inside the herb itself biochemically. But what would you think I'm putting you on the spot, but what would you think the energy of, calendula would be? How would
Calendula.
you describe it if you had to describe it?
We call it the sunshine protector. And the reason that here, and it actually does have some natural SPF, but it's a flower that brings so much joy when you're
Yeah.
growing it, you're harvesting it, and then you're working with it. And then just from a medicinal component, it is like the archer, it is the protector, and it is there that it could do so much for you. There's just so many medicinal properties with it. So I agree. I love that you
Mm.
highlight that.
Yeah, fantastic. And then let's move on to Arnica. It's well known, but it's often misunderstood. Now, in Australia, Arnica as a herb is, we can use it externally. We can't use it internally, but we can use it externally. And I happen to use a lot of it because I work with a lot of women, pregnancy, post birth, and often prescribing Arnica. But what's actually happening when we use it?
Arnica is so wonderful. And I think now that we're even understanding how inflammation is a part of our wellness journey, there's even more value to be
Yeah.
having Arnica on a regular basis. So how people typically become familiar with Arnica is through wound care and a recovery herb. And oftentimes people think that it's intended to sort of burn so that it's creating a response. And the reality is it's really doing like micro circulation. It is improving circulation at the area of injury, and it's therefore improving the oxygen flow that's coming in there and increasing the rate at which you heal. And what I love about Arnica, especially what we do at Green Goo, when you have high concentrations of that Arnica, you can get a nice systemic response. So one of my favorite things to do, I call it Sanctuary Sunday, and I'll just butter up from head to toe with our pain relief formula that's rich in ginger and Arnica and Calendula, and and I'll just put my bathrobe on and let my skin absorb it and have just a mindful moment for about 30 minutes. And then afterwards, whether it's
Mm.
in the day, start the day, when you're managing your inflammation, you can see a real connection. So you don't have to have an injury to appreciate Arnica. You can
Mm.
feel a real connection between that mind, body, immune system, nervous system response that our skin has such a significant impact because you think about it, your skin is born from the same embryonic tissue as your nervous system. It is rich in neurotransmitters. So there's a way that you can nurture your body that then supports the rest of your systems.
Mm. I love that you had that very holistic framework on herbs. And I think obviously that comes from your training in psychoneuroimmunology. For many of my audience, maybe they haven't heard of that expression before. Can you just tell us what it is so that we can really understand the slant or the lens that you're viewing herbs through? Because I think that's important too.
Yes. So psychoneuroimmunology is the study of your mind, your immune system, and your nervous system and how they all work together. And what's interesting is I fast forward to this moment with nutritive skincare, and I have a real value and now understanding of how that skin plays a pivotal role in that feedback loop. And so oftentimes we just look at the skin as the largest organ. It's just there to signal, hey, I've got these other organs. And the reality is it is your first responder. It is in a general
Mm.
state of fight or flight most of the day. I try to describe this to my daughter and I say, when you're scrolling, you're actually alerting your skin, which is then alerting your nervous system, which then does the immune system
Mm.
response. So number one, the value is avoid those chemicals on your skin that are then telling your immune system that you are in a state of fight or flight or it's unsafe, which then impacts your nervous system. And you think about, then it starts to affect your sleep, starts to impact your clarity. And you don't typically think of the skin being as involved as it is. However, when you start nourishing your skin, you start to feel that connection and that feedback loop, and it's a very different relationship with your longevity and your wellness.
Mm, it's a really beautiful framework, and then it makes me instantly think of the research that I've read around connection and the power of touch, and how even modalities like massage can have profound effects on the nervous system, and how important tactile therapies can be, and how important the skin is in our whole body health.
You nailed it. And that's another reason why I like to do that Sanctuary Sunday. One of those reasons is for touch because you think about when we put lotion on, it takes us 10 seconds to get it done. Well, when you're salving up, you're really intentional. And there's, like you said, a connection between our vagal tone and touch. And vagal tone is basically nourishing your nervous system to be able to respond to stress. And you want to be able to have a strong vagal tone so that you can, we call it, don't leave your hand on the hot stove for long, have a human experience, but not let that rush of fight or flight take over. And you really want to be able to have a strong vagal tone. And the secret to that is touch.
What a great reminder. Now, I am sipping away here at my chamomile tea, and I'd love to talk about that next because I think it's such a beautiful herb. I use this a lot in my pediatric practice. Can you tell us a bit about how it works and how you would use it and any other insights you have around this herb?
It's actually a beautiful segue talking about your nervous system because this beautiful flower binds to your GABA receptors and actually has a calming effect on your nervous system. So although in teas, you might feel that calming effect, but what that does when you put it into a skincare solution is that we now know there's a direct connection. There's been some really interesting research where the Department of Behavioral Medicine partnered with the Department of Dermatology or the Journal of Dermatology. And they did some research studies to prove that mindfulness not only helped reduce cortisol, but reduce inflammation. And they had visible improvements if they were suffering from like eczema or psoriasis or some kind of skin inflammation. And that's why chamomile is such a wonderful ingredient when we're looking at reducing skin inflammation. And we have higher concentrations in this in our baby balm for eczema or our dry skin formula, because not only does it help soothe the irritation, but it also signals to your immune system to calm down. And so chamomile is just this like beautiful flower that really demonstrates the connection that your nervous system and your skin have together and how your skin
It's mind
manifests.
blowing.
It is.
Yes, 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 yes. And even just looking at a chamomile flower, I mean, we just walk over them, when we're walking on the lawn or what have you. But if you stop and you really observe the chamomile flower, it is just beautiful. It's like perfection in a flower. So small, so unassuming, but so powerful.
It does. It has this like sweet, delicate energy to it, like very angelic. And I think about how it impacts your body in that same way. It's just this very gentle, sweet, beautiful little fairy of an herb that's there to support you.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. Now, plantain is the next herb I want to talk about. Now, I had this fascinating experience with my puppy. She got an upset tummy and she was scratching at the back door to go outside. And she went outside and she sniffed, 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 sniffed. And then she finally found a little plant and she started eating it. And I went over and I had a look because when we took her for a walk a couple of days later, she did the same thing. She was sniffing at a fence. She found a plantain and she started eating it. And I just thought, she really understands her body, this dog. It's absolutely mind blowing. But a lot of people may not have heard of plantain, but we think about it, or a lot of people think about it as just a weed, but it is something that's so much more powerful than that. What is this powerful first aid herb?
First, I love how intuitive that your dog was and knowing how valuable
Yeah.
this herb was going to be. And you're exactly correct. It's what we know is a weed, and most of the time it gets mowed over or stepped on. And little do you know, you're stepping on nature's Band-Aid. It is truly nature's Band-Aid. And it has all these wonderful properties where it can increase oxygen to the wound site, speed up the healing, and have the repair tissue, and also create some coagulation as well to help with that wound area. So this is critical in our first aid solution, combined with yarrow and chickweed and calendula to have this nature's Band-Aid. But once upon a time ago, what people would do is they would just pull that weed and just put it over a wound. And it also has some anti-sting, anti-itch components to it. So it's incredibly versatile
Wow.
and such a sweet little weed.
Yes, 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 yes. So bites, stings, inflamed wounds, anything else that come to mind? What about, I don't know, insect bites, mosquito bites that can get itchy? What else would you use it for?
I mean, you're nailing all of it. And especially for any kind of wound, cut, laceration, any abrasion, it's so versatile. And then again, giving it a good companion herb to go with it just helps elevate whatever that is that you want to address because it's such a versatile plant.
Perfect. Okay, so next on our list is rose hips. They're
Mhm.
very nutrient dense. How do rose hips help support our health from that, general perspective and then a first aid perspective?
Rose hips are rich in flavonoids, vitamin C, and to your point, nutrient dense. They are packed in this tiny little red berry. And we love it for anti-aging and skin repair. So we'll combine this with
Great.
helichrysum, blue yarrow, add some aloe vera so you get some rich hydration to penetrate the skin layers. Because when you can get something vitamin C dense like that with the flavonoids, you're looking at some real antioxidants and collagen building and all of that fun stuff, elasticity that you're looking for in your skin repair. And so we have that in our skin repair formula and then also in a vitamin C serum, both of which are fantastic for sunspots, wrinkles, afterburn, and scar. And it's so rich in vitamin C. And I think it's kind of a trending term right now, and I want to invite this to listeners that most of the vitamin C that you're getting on the market is a synthetic alternative that is very difficult for your skin to absorb. And so when you have a
Mm.
nutrient dense plant like rose hips, you actually can have the medicinal properties penetrate the epidermal layers where you're getting the results that you're looking for. It's
I
like
think that's an interesting delineation there is that, often you think you're buying a vitamin C that you can put on topically, but the form may not be able to get into your body through the skin. But it's a big delineation there. So rose hips naturally can do that. What about rosehip tea? I really like the flavor of rosehip tea. I think it's so nice. I always put a bit of a slice of lemon in there too, but I really like the flavor of it.
And again, high in vitamin C and antioxidants and flavonoids, and it is delicious, and I love that you put the lemon in. That's just like a nice little twist.
Yes.
And then you just add some more vitamin
Yeah,
C.
yeah,
And when
yeah.
you're doing that internally as well, then you're getting that, again, rich nourishment that you can't always get from the traditional, vitamin C sources, if you will.
And I think of what you've touched on today as well is the concept of herbs being used externally in a way that can be medicinal. I think a lot of people miss that that's a possibility with herbs, that they can be medicinal. And so, if a listener wanted a simple herbal first aid kit at home, what would you include and in what form?
Rich in all of these plant properties is so good. And nutritive skincare, thinking about your skin instead of I'm going to go and address this one wound and perhaps not bring a good ingredient in. So when you're thinking about your first aid and nutritive skincare, you really touched on key plants that are important. So the calendula, the chamomile, the rose hips, and if you can find them in their purest form, that's really important too, the arnica. So you're not compromising the integrity of the plant. And really, a lot of those herbs are going to cover broad spectrum your first aid needs. Now, of course, I'd love for you to have Green Goo and have your Green Goo first aid bundle, which is 4 different formulas. And you can literally clean out your
Yep.
first aid cabinet and have it touch on all of the symptom relief that you're looking for rather than having 100 different solutions for one-time use.
And so, in that, what are the 4 different products that are in that?
So you've got your first aid, and this is going to be your wound care solution. And this has 13 herbs. And so some other herbs to think about, rosemary and lavender. They're high in astringent. So when you combine that with calendula and plantain, you've got a nice wound care solution. Then you've got your dry skin formula with Green Goo, which is if harsh winter months or if you're suffering from chronic skin conditions, that's where that chamomile comes in. And so you're calming the nervous system and also nourishing it. And elderflower, that's another great one for irritations that we have in the dry skin formula. Then, of course, you've got your pain relief, which is your analgesic. I like not having some of these petroleum-based arnicas, which are typically what's out on the market. So think about not just the plants that you're looking to incorporate, but also what is the companion oil. You want a plant-based oil that is friendly with our semi-permeable membrane of our skin so that you can easily absorb these oils. And then the skin repair, which is back to that rosehip, helichrysum, aloe vera, packed in vitamin C, and great for anti-aging, but really it's your after sun, after burn and scar solution.
Beautiful. I think me thinking instantly was the carrier oils or the other things that are in products that we kind of touched on that at the beginning. But, people presume that if a product has a herb in it, that it's going to be natural and it's going to be all clean and it's all going to be good. But I really encourage listeners to make sure that they check their labels and they read the fine print and they really look at what else is in their products because there's a lot of what we call greenwashing where it's made to look really good and clean without, all the nasties in it. But there can be very commonly found, carrier oils that are probably rancid or parabens or other things that are actually not going to be helpful for our bodies.
Exactly. They're going to be endocrine disruptors that are going to make your body work harder. And if they do have medicinal properties in the formula, they're just going to sit on the surface of your skin because it's going to suffocate your skin. Along with, we have some really good healthy microbiome that's on our skin. And we do want the herbs to complement that and or whatever, topical that we decide to put on so that the body can work in an optimal state.
That's a very good reminder. And another thing that I wanted to touch on that came to my mind just then was the synergy of herbs and how when they're paired together, they can really have a synergy about them. Can you speak to that and just let our listeners have a little insight into how you think about the synergy of plants and plant medicine?
The entourage effect is amazing, and it really reflects
Yeah.
our bodies and our systems and how holistic they are and how integrative they are. And when you think about when you go to your endocrinologist versus your, psychologist, and when you bring them together, all of a sudden they have a better picture. Well, it's very similar to the plants and how they work because calendula is a wonderful antiseptic, but when you combine that with the plantain and the yarrow, all of a sudden it's like you've got a pump, a valve, and it's bringing in that oxygen and it's slowing down. And like the plantain is really good too at like pulling out. It's like they call it a drawing salve, like a drawing herb. And so when you have that combined, when you have a bee sting or you have poison ivy, they work really well together. And so, yeah, that is just as important as the herb as a single entity.
Beautiful. Well, this conversation is such a powerful reminder that healing certainly doesn't have to be harsh or complicated, and the beautiful way that herbs work with the body, reducing inflammation, protecting tissue, and creating the right conditions for their repair. Jodi, thank you so much for helping make herbal first aid practical and accessible for families everywhere. My last question for you is, are there any myths or last thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Plants can work better than your traditional chemical-laden solutions. So I invite you to go out and start making that shift.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us, Jodi.
Thank you. Thank you for spreading goodness.
My pleasure. So, if this episode inspired you, share it with someone who wants a more natural approach to first aid and start with just one herb at home. We'll put all the contact details for Jodi in the show notes. You can reach out to her and she'll help you as you need it.